Hi, welcome to Andrew Buckle comic review of Tarzan Family, the giant issue. This is 52 pages. It's not particularly a giant in compared with the sort of 100-page giants that they did a bit earlier, but you've got a 52-page giant here, 50 cents, issue 63, May or / June 1976. And I mean, it's still very nice. I love a giant issue. There's no question about it. Giant issues are always great. And it has a couple of stories. Unfortunately, slightly confusing the pictures on the front. You've got here the Song of the Dolphin, you've got Korak. I must admit, I'm not familiar with the Korak story. John Carter of Mars, that doesn't really give any description to the story at all. Other Worlds doesn't appear in it at all. If there was something called Other Worlds, it's certainly not in my issue. Someone's ripped it out. Carson of Venus, which is the main reason I bought it. There is actually a book of Carson. There's a trade paperback with some of the stories. I haven't got all the stories of Carson and Tarzan. Of course, I think there's been a series of the Carson of Venus stories as well, comic books. So you've got Tarzan. However, the Tarzan there, you've got to see Tarzan. That obviously is Joe Kubert. When I bought it, I thought, oh, Joe Kubert. I love Joe Kubert's Tarzan. However, slightly, inside, it's not his version. So it's slightly annoying. The first story, this is obviously a lovely good old Twinkies advert as well. Good old Twinkies with Batman there. So you've got a sort of separate Batman story there. But you've got here the dolphin story. And it's okay, but it's really predictable. You've got Atlantis, there's all issues of pollution, and you know what's going to happen at the end. I knew before it finished what was going to happen, so I suspect you will as well. But it's still a good story. There's nothing wrong with it. I think fundamentally, you've got here, obviously, Korak meets this woman. Looks a bit like the Red Sonja, but it's not. And then you're on to the next story. So we've got, I don't want to obviously show the end, so I skipped that. You've got here John Carter, obviously, one of the, finds the secret diaries. Mysteriously finds the secret diaries. It's lucky that they can read the secret diaries at that point, but I don't know how many years this archaeological dig they could find that. But, of course, straight away they can read all the story. And you find John Carter, which I suppose actually, I was being a bit rotten actually. There is spacecraft there, because there's a spacecraft there as well. So it does actually bear some semblance to the story, which is unusual for a comic book. A cover matching the actual innards? No. But you've got the story there. It's a very short story. It's not, I was hoping it was going to be a nice long story, John Carter one. Now, I think they brought out some reprints of the John Carter stories. I must admit, I'm not particularly familiar with this one particularly. So, and it's obviously ends very quickly. It's about 4 or 5 pages. That's it. Still very nice artwork. Of course, standard brilliant artwork there. On to the next story. And the next story is, well, just quickly go. You've got the, of course, letters. And it's quite a good little letters because it's got various comments. Amazon of Basum, of course. And it's also saying, I was absolutely delighted, etc., with this. Some people obviously turn around and say, I wasn't particularly delighted, so I was disappointed, etc., with the story. There's always the way with these things. Sometimes you read it, you wonder if it's people who are reading the same magazine, the way they comment. But I guess you can never please everyone. But however, Carson of Venus, this one, I love this. And the artwork story, Kaluta, good old Kaluta. I must admit, when I first looked at it, it wasn't immediately obvious it's Kaluta, but you can see it's Kaluta when you look up. But I didn't. But I felt that he sort of changed a bit. When you actually see him here, he's got like his picture of, obviously there, Carson there, and then you've got a couple of pages on. Sort of doesn't look exactly the same character, really, personally. But anyway, that's a bit slightly long, but still great artwork. I mean, it's a real story. Obviously, he's met, these people, they don't believe he's from another world. Strange enough, why would they? I mean, he's obviously speaking Venusian, etc. Or whatever, maybe they were speaking American, maybe. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? But then you've got a storyline, and that obviously finishes with a dramatic end. And I'm not going to spoil the end, of course. And it says, The Menace from the Skies for the next issue. And then you've got 2 giant specials, and these are giant specials. These are the brilliant ones there, like the Batman one there. And also Secret Origins of Supervillains. I love those ones. They are absolutely brilliant. Now, this is the disappointment. But at the same time, if you're a Hal Foster fan, you probably love this. But I had to say the stories are a bit sort of not really, they didn't work for me. They might have worked if they had gone for a bigger panel. Would have probably been much better. But instead they went for a lot of panels on a page. I don't know about you, but maybe I mean, that is quite a lot of panels. That's 12 panels on a page. That's a lot of story. And it's really quite sort of clunky. The tribesmen are waiting for him. They have seen him and his men, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's not, surely you would want like the story to be told by the artwork, but instead they've got all this sort of text, which of course was the style they did it back then. It's just, you've got no sort of dialogues either. I mean, it's just, I don't think there's any dialogue actually, just looking at it. No, there's no dialogue at all. So no speech balloons, whatever. There's no sort of, you've got here, there is no sign of life within the fort. I mean, really, would you need to put that? I don't know. I mean, personally, but of course, maybe that was what they expected. They didn't get that style back in the... Now, this one is originally published 1931. I mean, it looks pretty good for 1931. I mean, Hal Foster, of course, could draw amazingly well. But it's just somehow... And of course, the reproduction is not particularly brilliant. I think this would have worked maybe better in black and white, real sharp, really tight, really brilliant copies of it would have been great. But unfortunately, it sort of becomes a bit smudged. And with the small panels, it's really quite hard. I mean, they've got scenes like this, daunted by the fierce attack of the French, etc., etc. And you can see it's quite smudgy, sort of black. It doesn't really sort of work personally for me. And quite often the stories, there was always obviously the female, they're obviously the prettiest of the Hawks dancing girls. There's always a sort of, they seem to do that quite a lot in all these sort of old Tarzan ones where they fall in love or whatever, would help Tarzan for some random reason. They would just sort of, thus starts the mad ride, etc. And it obviously continues. But they also, I love this, you've got the, of course, Shazam there again, the Bible, first edition, Batman one, Tarzan, Detective Comics, Dick Tracy. I can't say I've ever seen that Dick Tracy one. But Ghosts, they go for quite a lot now, those giant editions. But it's quite an unusual seeing Tarzan as well in this. Very unusual looking Tarzan, for my eyes. But again, and then you've got this big, huge panel right at the end, which is very odd. French soldiers raise a horse cheer, blah, blah, blah. You can guess the storyline. I'm sorry, that was a slight bit of spoiler at the end, but it's a real sort of clunky, personally, story. And I'm surprised they put it. I would have thought a Joe Kubert story would have been much better. But at the same time, of course, probably at this point, reprinting these Tarzans, these sort of the Hal Foster ones, would have been quite special. Because if they haven't been reprinted, I don't know if they've been reprinted before, that a lot of people wouldn't have had access to. It's not like now where you've got hundreds and thousands of really top quality, restored, reconstructed, whatever, cleaned up books that really look amazing, massive volumes of Hal Foster, etc. These would have been probably maybe the first time that people would have seen these stories. And so maybe, it's good that they're included. So I'm not going to dismiss them but they just really, this didn't really appeal to me particularly personally as a story. It wasn't my cup of tea. Anyway, that's just, and also Tarzan looks a bit odd. He doesn't look like Tarzan, somehow familiar with Tarzan, but that's another thing, I guess. However, that's it. So you got here, and that runs out, of course, the good old, so always had that one, the good old 204 Revolutionary War Soldiers. I always love that bit at the end. That was quite a regular feature. I don't know how many copies of those, how many they sold of those, 204 pieces. Must have been pretty impressive. I don't know how big they were. Were they big, small? No idea. And of course, you've always got the wonderful back as well. But that's it. Tarzan Family presents Korak. I bought it for Carson and John Carter, but I guess everyone would have bought it for Korak, etc. And I don't know how many stories they went through, how many more of these issues. There were quite a few, I think, but, giant 50 cents and issue 63 from 1976.